Ladies and gentlemen, he's known as the second best talk show host in Missouri. He's the Shermanator. He's Scott Sherman, and he joins us every Friday. Good morning, Scott Sherman.
Hello, McGraw. That's DJ, by the way.
What I think DJ counts as talk show host.
Yeah, and second best,
which is even more embarrassing that the Missouri broadcasters, their only award for hosting is DJ.
Yes,
which it's just so ridiculous. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to disparage your high rank here.
No, why would you do something that the industry hasn't already done to me on its own?
Ladies and gentlemen, second best DJ in town,
hey,
Scott Sherman. Good morning, Scott Sherman.
Hi.
Anything we need to get to? Anything you need to bring up before I get to my topic of conversation here?
Well, I just think that this is the pins and needles time for anybody that cares about major Supreme Court decisions. This is sort of sweeps month.
Like any day now, right?
Next week is going to be it. And it's Mondays and Thursdays that is the normal release of the court opinions. And there have been some pretty good ones and some pretty hot button ones, but not the big ones. There's some big ones that are still left. The two gay marriage cases are the two headliners. It's either going to be Monday or it's going to be Thursday. There have been a couple others that involving the Fifth Amendment, the swabs of the DNA.
Right.
There was one about arbitration clauses. You know, these things are sort of stuff that certain folks have been looking forward to, but the real action is going to be Monday. So Supreme Court followers and people that like hot topics, next week is your week.
The two gay marriage ones.
Yeah.
Can they vote one way and one the other way?
Yeah, and there's been a fair number of people that have no idea what's going to happen that have guessed that one's going to go one way and one's going to be the other. Here are the differences between the two cases. One case is whether or not same-sex people have a fundamental constitutional right to get married. And marriage is considered a fundamental constitutional right, meaning that the government, in order to restrict it, has to have a compelling state interest, a really incredibly important one that's very limited in its sort of restriction,
right,
such as you can't have 9-year-olds getting married, you can't have bigamy. Those things have been upheld as reasonable restrictions on marriage. But the question will be whether or not gay people getting married, whether or not the government has enough of an interest in preventing that from happening for it to be legal. So that's the Proposition 8 California one. That's just straight up whether or not gay marriage is legal. The other one is about benefits and whether someone that's deemed to be married, and in California there are people that got married who are recognized as being married, whether or not those same-sex married couples, and there's states like Hawaii that's had it, I think there's like 8 other states that have gay marriage, whether they're entitled to federal benefits. That's more narrow, but if you look at it, if you're legally married, there shouldn't be a restriction on getting the benefits of your spouse when they pass away.
There's a case very similar to that working its way through here in Missouri where the officer, the Missouri State Patrol officer, died in the line of duty, I believe.
That's right.
And was married in every way, shape, or form, except didn't have a piece of paper because he's not allowed. And his partner says, I deserve spousal benefits.
That's right. I think it was Christmas Eve or something.
Yeah.
So the question will be, that's state benefits. So the idea of whether or not a marriage is lawful then entitles the spouse to get benefits. That's the other case. There's the Perry case. That's the Windsor case. And so in the meantime, while the Supreme Court is wrangling with this, and it's going to be close on both ends, the newest and latest opinion poll has come out, and officially 50% or more of the country supports the idea of gay marriage.
Right.
So as whether or not the Supreme Court officially and finally says same-sex people have a fundamental right to be married as heterosexual couples do, you're seeing a movement towards the acceptance of it, and state legislatures are moving towards recognizing it.
I think that's interesting, but I think the other one that I'm waiting for is this, and I think this is going to be a pretty big story, and that is the affirmative action case coming out of Austin, Texas.
Yes. I want to say this right because I always say it wrong. Abigail Fisher. And I always say Abby Sutherland. That's the girl that took the boat to by herself to.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
So I've always said that it's not her. This gal was a high school senior, and she applied for college to the University of Texas at Austin, which is, as most major state schools are, Mizzou, Michigan,
right?
A really good school that the majority of.
That's where everybody goes.
That's where they want to go when they want to go to the state public school. Well, Texas created sort of its own entrance program, the Top 10% program. And it's really kind of cool. If you go to any school, regardless of whether you went to Sugar Land, Texas, or you went to a bad school somewhere in Houston or in Dallas, if you finish in the top 10% of your class, you were automatically admitted to UT. But that didn't fill up the registration, so there was a certain number of at-large bids,
right? Okay.
like the NCAA tournament,
right?
So then part of the criteria for getting into an at-large bid was race. So there were all these other things, sports,
right,
and extracurriculars,
GPA,
and all the stuff that everybody says is legitimate. But race was one of the factors in the non-automatic bids. And Abby Fisher challenged that, saying that violates the Equal Protection Clause because it violates race.
Now, that's why, okay, that's the particulars of this. But I think affirmative action is his last breath. I really think that this time they're going to knock it down. And let me say this: you can be against affirmative action and still not be a racist, right? I mean, so let me just. But I think affirmative action has always been unsettling. It's always been it just doesn't sound right because yes, you're giving a benefit to one person over another because of something that happened 200 years ago, so it's always. But are you going to tell me that Sasha Barack or Sasha Obama, should get a better chance of going to the University of Texas than your daughter, who's white?
Yeah, I was having this argument in college and law school. It's like Bill Cosby's kids get a benefit,
right?
And I don't,
right?
Not that I deserve one, but what difference does it make? None of us had anything to do with slavery, and we're almost to the point where none of us had anything to do with the racial and racist policies that were horrible, like Jim Crow laws and things in the South. But we've moved past it.
Right, and there are still some legacy issues and some legacy problems, and it's, I get that if you're born white in this country, you're automatically starting off on the 50-yard line as opposed to somebody who's born black. But with that being said, if you're born black in a mansion in Ladue,
that's right,
and you're born white in South City, guess what? The black kid from Ladue probably has a better chance of winning the race.
That's right,
than you do.
The best color to be born is green.
Right.
But we've gotten to the point, but maybe it served its purpose. But I've always thought that what affirmative action did was it set back the equality goal, which is what the country has always been founded on.
Right.
There was certainly still is, I'm not naive, racism and bigotry in this country. It's one of the darkest and ugliest and nastiest chapters of our history. However, at some point, you have to graduate from that and get to the point where you say, look, there are people coming here that are different colors from Southeast Asia and from Central Asia and Africa and India that don't speak English, Bosnia, and they're finishing in the top 10%, and they weren't even born. They didn't even speak English. So at some point, you got to step it up and move past it. I think that this case, with education, because if there's one place where the real world has never really taken hold, it's in higher education.
Right.
If this case, if the Fisher case comes down where they can just take that out and substitute something like socioeconomic status or something like...
That is not race-based.
If you live in North City
Right.
It's not because you're black that you have a challenge of getting good grades. It's a challenge of being safe and getting shot
Right.
and not having the right peer groups and being made fun of for trying to achieve and not having the right materials and being 110 degrees in the school. Your race has zero to do with the challenge of your education.
Clarence Thomas talks about this. He says, look, when people stare at me, do they think I'm smart or did I get to where I am because of the color?
When I stare at him, I think he's a lunatic, but it's because he's crazy.
But that has nothing to do with the color of his skin.
No, it's because of what he writes on paper.
Right. But
that's what's cool. We can make fun of a guy because of the content of his opinions or his character. It's really Dr. King's legacy.
Right. And that's why I think that I think it's in its last vestiges. There's just no way that this Supreme Court ruled that the University of Texas is correct to use race in this admission, and I think affirmative action as we know it, however because it's always sort of reared its weird, ugly head some way.
Yeah.
That it cannot survive. It just can't. If we want to move forward as a society, it cannot survive. Is it too late? Is it too early? I don't know.
And even if you go back to the Hockey case, even if you go back to the University of Michigan case, the law school case that had affirmative action as part of the entrance requirements that sort of created this. Even those majority opinions said there will be a day when we don't need this anymore, and that's really positive.
The fact that a black man is sitting in the Oval Office right this very second dictating to a bunch of white guys what to do is the definition of success. Therefore, how can you blanketly say that his daughters get a special assistance to go to a law school, right? It's laughable.
It is. And when there are other factors that are more legitimate that can be. Now, at the same time, let's be very clear. Things like Title VII, where non-discriminatory laws to protect people in the workplace or in housing, all of the things that came out of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, those are so important.
But that's different.
Exactly. And we have to be clear about there is a difference between protecting people from discrimination and creating different forms of discrimination by trying to, quote, level the playing field. We don't need to do the latter. We need to protect people, and we need to clamp down on bigotry by not creating sort of a subculture of it, by rewarding something that's irrelevant. Your race is irrelevant to your success.
That's Scott Sherman, ladies and gentlemen. He is with us every Friday. Scott Sherman, who's your sponsor?
St. Louis Home Retention Group. McGraw, they're talking about these interest rates going up. They're talking about how the Fed is going to do something. Well, guess what? There are programs in place, federal programs in place to protect people's homes and to give people the opportunity to have their interest rates locked in at a very historic low permanent rate. And St. Louis Home Retention Group are the leaders and the best at doing that in the St. Louis area. A 95+% success rate. That is unprecedented. And if they can't help you, they won't take your money. But they'll talk to you for free. They'll analyze your situation. Not only can you save your house, you can save a ton of money. 636-527-5121, 636-527-5121, or stlouishomeretentiongroup.com.